All right, we are at the top of the hour and set to get started here. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, wherever you are joining us in the world. Thank you for attending today's webinar, Be Seen and Heard, Attracting and Cultivating Your B2B Audience. I'm Joey Yazzolino, Senior Product Marketing Manager at LucidWorks, and I'm joined by our guest speaker, Phyllis Davidson, VP Principal Analyst at Forrester. Before we begin, we do have a few quick housekeeping items. We are recording this presentation, and it will be available on demand after today. A PDF copy of the slides are available in the resources section of the platform, as well as a copy of our Site Search 101 ebook, which we'll be discussing shortly. Please feel free to open the Q&A widget on the viewing console to submit your questions. We'll be answering these towards the end of today's presentation. And if we're unable to get to any of these questions, we will, of course, be following up by email. If you need any technical assistance, please reach out via that same Q&A widget, and we are more than happy to help. I'll be back briefly to cover some Site Search 101 and MC our Q&A session. But for now, I am pleased to turn it over to our guest speaker, Phyllis Davidson. Phyllis, all yours.
Yes, thank you. Thank you so much, Joey. Really pleased to be here with you today to talk about this topic. And I'm going to start with a little bit of a personal story. So I'm currently on the San Francisco Peninsula, but I'm thinking about moving to the California coast in a few years. And for fun, I sometimes look at homes for sale online, and inevitably that gets me on some realtors' lists. And once or twice I've been interested in something, provided a little extra information, and now, of course, I've got realtors bombarding me with emails, texts, content I'm not interested in right now, and more. And did I mention that right out the gate, in a first response to any of these realtors, they always ask, are you looking seriously? And I say, no, I won't be looking for years, but they keep sending me stuff. So I can tell you now the realtors who I'm probably not going to be working with in a few years. So look, the reality is, and let me just get to my next slide here. None of us likes to be yelled at, right? And that, unfortunately, whether in our consumer lives or our business lives, that's what we hear. We hear this megaphone trying to get our attention. And it works far better when the organizations that would like us as customers work to sense our interests, our actions, and our readiness, and then attract us like a magnet. So we've got the megaphone or the magnet here. And building that attraction is something that takes time. It's not a sprint, but more of a marathon. Organizations need to be willing to go that extra distance to effectively sense and respond to the needs of their audiences. So today I'm going to talk about the key things you need to do to attract your audience, how to get them to your content and to your website. And together with Joey, we'll talk about what you need to do to keep that audience interested through a buying journey. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about expectations here. I talked about my own B2C experience a moment ago, and while that didn't work out so well, the fact is our experiences in B2C, which tend to be more transactional, like choosing a movie in Netflix, they provide a level of personalization that we then naturally expect in our B2B lives. But our B2B content engines are not keeping up with these expectations that we increasingly have. We're still not very good at delivering the right content at the right place at the right time to our audiences, even though we've kind of been talking about that for years. From a content planning perspective, we're still too fragmented across teams that contribute content to the customer experience. In fact, our data shows that only about 16% of organizations indicate that they feel they're advanced in content planning. And from a production perspective, we still rely on really manual processes that aren't really scalable or measurable, but we keep churning out content. And so we've got the highest level of maturity here at 30%. And when it comes to promoting or activating content, we're not delivering that personalized experience, like I said. And we don't really understand our audience's interactions as they move through their journeys the way that we should. So only 19% say they're advanced in this area. And then finally, most organizations still recognize themselves as quite immature from a performance management perspective, with inadequate use of automation and content technology. So this is really the weakest area yet at about 10% advanced. So look, there's incredible complexity across the whole content engine and the customer experience that engine serves. So between myriad content types, the different teams involved in creating, delivering the content, and also the array of touch points and technologies, it's really no wonder that it's a struggle for businesses today to manage their content engine. In fact, almost half of the organizations that participated in our very last State of B2B content study, which is what I cited earlier, report significant content orchestration challenges. So achieving a unified view of the content ecosystem is really hard. So let's consider what it takes to advance the content engine. And I've already talked about the R's and the P's here. The thing is, first you have to commit to the level of maturity your organization is willing to tackle. The customer experience is always at the center, and they own that experience. So the focus is the 4 R's, and driving the 4 R's is the 4 P's, but I'm going to talk about another set of letters, and it's the stuff that intersects those, the 4 A's. So alignment, aligning stakeholders and resources. Automation, so using automation in the systems to help you scale the content engine and the customer experience as a result. A new view of assets as modules, and I'll talk about this a bit more, that enable right-time personalization, again, at scale, and analytics that help us adapt and improve. So there's a lot to cover here, but we're really going to just focus on one area of content planning today, and that's the content marketing area here. Now, we define content marketing in a really specific way. It's often a term used in general to just talk about using marketing and content. But we chose to use a very specific definition here because we wanted to put some emphasis around this particular area of content planning. And what we think of as content marketing is your digital footprint building. So it's a blend of SEO, content strategy, digital marketing, editorial expertise, all of these things to create that digital authority and inbound traffic around a family of topics. So there are these 6 core principles associated with this content engine. They really serve as the foundation. It starts with audience and understanding your audience, understanding the themes and topics that are driven by their needs and interest. It's about having a differentiated thought leadership point of view. And it's also about having ongoing or perpetual content delivery. So in the style of an always-on brand publisher. Okay, so it's typically focused on building that organic top-of-funnel awareness and traffic, but that's engagement, of course, that ultimately seeds demand. And content marketing certainly aligns to the early stages of the journey, so it's where you're triggering interest, but that extends to benefits in supporting and nurturing ongoing engagement. Also, let's not forget sales will use content. In fact, we find that winning sales reps use the most content in order to engage their buyers through the journey. So at Forrester, we use this model just to talk about how to optimize content marketing. And I'm just going to touch on each of these areas briefly today. So remember that the big goal with this area of content strategy is that digital footprint building. And that can only be gained via search engine authority and social media visibility and engagement. So content marketing certainly doesn't negate the need for product-related content, but it's unique in that it's inherently focused on being relevant to a specific audience needs and interests to draw them in. So that means you're looking at their online search behavior. You can see at the top that we start with audience prioritization, and we always start our discussions on content planning with audience. It's really a prerequisite for getting things done right. And that's first you have to start with the upstream definition of the audience, something that usually comes from folks like Joey, from product marketers. Now, it may sound obvious, but we find quite often content marketers are creating a really generic content strategy and set of content, which results in pretty ineffective content, frankly, that doesn't perform the way everyone hopes. In this persona framework, you see, we cite 4 key attribute areas. Now, most important for content creators are the emotive attributes to help understand what are their challenges, what keeps them up at night, and how to build the right messaging to attract them. Then there's the behavioral attributes that provide insights that you need for your buyer journey mapping. What do they need at each stage of the journey? Decision process attributes get at what role does a particular buyer play in the purchase process for an organization, and how engaged are they throughout their decision making. So this is an important first step. Based on your prioritized audiences, you'll need to hone in on a family of themes and topics. And remember, that needs to be outside in. What is your audience interested in? What's aligned with their needs and interest? And then there's a natural cascade or waterfall here that starts with the themes, and then you identify the key topics trending with that audience. That will fuel keyword research and keyword universe definition. And that includes primary and alternate keyword phrases, all of which helps to drive up rankings and relevance. Once that keyword universe is built, you're then ready to create content. So this is a really important part of this waterfall, because marketers will often get this out of order, right? They'll switch content development and keywords in the process. And then what we find, that means that marketers will sort of scan their content once it's been written to optimize it for search before it goes live, when really the keyword strategy should be what informs the content ideation and the decision as to what assets to create on what topics. That is a far more effective approach. And we have found that that's still new in some organizations. So this visual, it's one of my favorites. It lays out the synergistic relationship that a keyword universe provides, connecting search marketing, content marketing, and social media marketing as you move into content planning. And the magic happens here when you align each of these things around that audience-centric keyword universe and use that as a basis for creating content. We think of this as the secret sauce. And like I said earlier, this is certainly about organic inbound engine, but frankly, this will also help you get found in other ways as well, including paid. So getting content, search, and social aligned across the universe really drives both organic and paid programs. And it boils down to your ability to digitally demonstrate that you publish enough relevant, quality content on a family of topics, and that enough other people and other websites have given that content a thumbs up by interacting with it and then pointing back to your website so that you're considered that authority on a family of topics. Okay, so as you ideate and plan content assets, we really recommend this good dose of stress testing your ideas. So validating your ideas, and this has to be from the vantage point of the audience and the marketplace, not just from you and your company. And this starts with, are your ideas themselves different? Are they unique and provocative? Are you offering a different way of doing something people do today, or a whole new paradigm? Are your ideas newsworthy? Would media or experts stand up and take notice? And what about provability? Can you use data, case studies, examples? What can you realistically get your hands on? And then are you differentiated, a little different than different, are you differentiated from your competitors? This is so often where we find folks fall short. They sort of run out of steam when it's time to look at your competitors' messaging and content. You want to understand how you show up against your competitors with fully differentiated content and ideas. And then finally, leverageability. You need content that passes these tests, but also provides a platform for your value proposition. And you want to remember that the best content plans deliver on It's a win-win for both you and your audience. So it delivers on goals for that both your audience has in their decision making and what you have in gaining their attention and gaining their trust and selling to them. Another area, there we go. Another area to evolve both planning and production is to work on content reuse. And that means starting with a primary asset and developing derivatives. Now, we find that most people are doing this to some extent, but probably should be doing it more. So it starts with a robust primary format, like a report or a white paper, something that has a combination of information artifacts like data along with case studies, your thought leadership and messaging. And from that primary asset, your team creates multiple derivative formats. And if you're really intentional about your approach here, you can get maximum value out of a primary asset. It's worth the investment. And if you do this skillfully, you can expand and scale your capabilities to meet the needs of more audience members, different personas at various points in their journey using this approach, because you fine-tune the content, keeping the same core ideas, but you fine-tune it to different persona needs, different points in the journey, etc. So this is an important area to look at. I'm going to share some other core characteristics of planning, creation, production that help scale the content engine. I just want to touch on a few data points. So 46% of organizations in the study we just did say that they're beginners at process KPIs. So I'm not talking about performance quite yet, but process KPIs. Many clients that we talk to don't focus on process at all. So by this, I mean the time that it takes to get approval, to translate and localize content, to actually get the content into market. So before you can measure performance, you really have to get your arms around process. And that means monitoring each step using tools like a universal content calendar and leveraging modular content. Today, almost 50% of orgs don't actually use modular content. And by this, we mean discrete content components, or atoms, we sometimes call it content atomization, that are managed not only at the asset level, but at the component level. And this allows you to scale and create more assets. It's something that feeds into the primary derivative approach, but it's even more than that. Now, we know that maturity in this area tends to be low, but what we recommend today is that organizations should be prioritizing using content modules at a minimum on their websites. So ensuring that core content like product names and descriptions are common and shared and updated across pages. And that content also, this modular approach, allows personalization. So let's talk a little bit more about the pesky problem of personalization. So part of the issue is that what most of us are used to and have been doing for years is just creating a lot of different content, right? Buyers, sellers, customers, and channel partners traditionally will create all different kinds of content using different content development tools. And at the end of the day, we end up with so much content that it's overwhelming, not only to our audience, but to people trying to manage it and activate it. So what we see year after year is that like between 60 and 70% of the content created by marketing isn't actually used as intended. It was created for a reason, but the sheer amount of it is impossible to deal with. So this type of linear scale puts enormous pressure on the developers of content. Every time something changes, they have to update it in multiple places, and that there's plenty of technology to do that automatically. We shouldn't be doing that anymore. Now, modular content is this technique that allows you to operationalize personalization at scale. So by atomizing content and tagging components, such as what you see here on the slide, that means that those components can be found, reused, recommended, and modified, okay, and combined dynamically. So you might have a module that's specific to an industry that you could add to a white paper. Maybe you have that module, it's different for 12 different industries, and depending on what someone's searching for in your website, they get that personalized industry version of the white paper or whatever. Between AI and content atomization, really we're getting closer to this promise of personalization that we've talked about. But it does have to start with some basics. Okay, so a little bit about content promotion, and that's about content being delivered in the right place in the right time, and how that comes together with the right audience and the right content. Personalization comes into play here too, because you not only need the content that's tweaked through atomization to meet the needs of a particular audience type, but when and where that content appears also should be personalized. Sometimes you don't even need to change the content, you just need to change the where it's delivered. So this is where search and social and the right targeting with display advertising, content syndication, for example, come into play. So effective promotion isn't about having a huge number of discrete assets to feed all the different channel needs. You may just need some tight content variations that serve a range of audiences. And remember, included here is not just a buyer audience, but also sales, partners, channels, and employees as well. Let me go back. Okay, so a little bit more on content marketing from a publishing standpoint. What we like to talk about is the fact that to bring your audience to you, you want to create a hub, if you will, a content marketing hub on your website that's kind of a destination publication, and that's where your always-on content is constantly being refreshed. So for many companies, it's a blog. It could also be a thought leadership site on its own domain, like adobecmo.com, or it could be content delivered on a content engagement platform. It could be all of these things, but it's your website, and SEO and organic social promotion are a given to get people there. You may also utilize a call to action that creates an opportunity for subscription to newsletters or other things based on audience preferences. And of course, getting those opt-ins is increasingly important so that we have permission to communicate. And there are also opportunistic activation paths here available that extend the value and use of content marketing assets. And sales is certainly one of those very important channels. Let's discuss performance now before I hand it off to Joey. And that means a discussion, frankly, about taxonomy. So lack of a universal taxonomy from most organizations is a top problem. But without that effective taxonomy that provides tagging and metadata management, you can't possibly measure the value of your content because you haven't tagged it. In fact, the majority of organizations complain that they can't quantify content engagement at all. They don't understand who, when, where, and how content engagement happens. And frankly, each of those W's plus the H is a tag. So often when I talk to clients, the first task we recommend if they have operations issues is to tackle their taxonomy issues. And yes, it brings into the forefront overall content management, so audit and inventory, adoption of the technologies you need to begin to scale the engine, and of course the integrations of technologies you need in order to collect data and perform analytics and just manage the whole engine. And this is the approach we use to guide clients to building and scaling a universal taxonomy, coupled with a unified metadata strategy. We think of it as the way to unlock your content value, hence the keyhole here, which requires this scope, build, validate, deploy kind of methodology. It's iterative, of course, and it's always informing and improving as it moves forward. So with that, I'm going to leave you with a list of top 10 pitfalls in content marketing. You might find that several of these resonate with you. I encourage you to think about what I shared today. I believe you'll have the presentation as well. And what I'm going to do now is hand off to Joey to talk more about what to do once you've got people to your site to keep them there and keep them interested. Joey, back to you.
Thank you so much, Phyllis. That was incredibly informative. I am in product marketing now. However, my past life for many years was in content marketing. And frankly, this is the type of situation where I wish I could pass this on to my former self But alas, learning the hard way in marketing is obviously also a rite of passage, I suppose. So here we are. But yes, thank you so much for that. For the rest of our audience, welcome to the LucidWorks portion of today's webinar, where we're going to dive into a little bit of Site Search 101 and describe why having quality site search is one of the most effective yet overlooked tools for content marketing. For anyone joining us late, I'm Joey Yazzolino. I'm the Senior Product Marketing Manager here at LucidWorks, and I'm currently focused on go-to-market for our SaaS offering called Connected Search. With that, let's take this content marketing discussion one step further. Let's say we've labored over an extensive strategy, we've created a library of compelling content, and we've launched an integrated campaign to drive traffic to said content. And it's working. Great, we've done it. We've followed Phyllis's advice, and in her own words, we've attracted and cultivated a B2B audience. But now what? How do we ensure that visitors continue to find the relevant content as they attempt to extend their customer journey and learn more about the solutions we have to offer? That's what we're going to be talking about today. Creating site stickiness, delivering the information your prospects and customers want, all through tools that are user-friendly, and we'll discuss best practices and the impact that site search has on reaching your KPIs and closing the loop with analytics that inform holistic customer experiences. So to get us started, I want to share some insights from our Site Search 101 ebook, which was recently released, and again, will be made available to everyone here. And we'll also set the tone with some definitions for the topic at hand, primarily because, first of all, when we talk about site search, many people jump straight to thinking about SEO, which is obviously important, but the site search we're discussing is actually the application on your site that allows visitors to search your public content, your collection of documents, product information, and try to answer any of the questions they have about your offerings. We're talking about the site search that powers information gathering for 30% of website visitors. While well-run content marketing campaigns can be super effective in generating interest, this is obviously what we're all working towards, we also know that 55% of visitors will abandon a site when they fail to find what they're looking for beyond that initial content consumption. So the relationship of the content you're creating and the discoverability of that content represents a highly critical challenge for web and content owners. And yet we also know, and this is the final stat for the day, I promise, 84% of businesses choose not to invest in their site search functionality. A frustrating search experience will leave a sour brand impression and send visitors looking elsewhere. Oftentimes this means back to Google, where your competitors are eagerly awaiting another crack at that prospect. But on the flip side, when we ensure that the right content continues to land in front of those seeking it, we're prompting conversions for prospects and allowing customers to feel confidence that we are indeed the medium to find the information they need. They need not look elsewhere. When we take a closer look at site search as a whole, it's really important to do just that, to look at the whole cycle, in this case, the infinity loop, to get a better understanding of the impact that quality site search will have across the entire customer journey. We're going to take a look at each of these key areas and their relationship. And of course, we'll start with interest. Where else should you start? When a visitor reaches your site, they're effectively showing their interest in what you have to offer, but they're looking to you to prove that it's actually right for them. At times, your homepage or landing page content may do that trick, but a more common scenario is that your new visitor really needs more from you. It's not just a one-click affair. And as Google and Amazon have trained us all to do, they often quickly look for that search magnifying glass on your site. This makes site search the first touch in facilitating their goal to go beyond interest. Conversely, for those more explorative site visitors that you may have, your search bar might be the last thing they touch if their manual efforts have failed to really follow up on the information that they were seeking. We know that exits from site search are the highest tracked in Google Analytics, so regardless of whether or not those users have immediately jumped to searching on your site for additional information, or if they browse your site and it went there as a last resort, this is often the final moment you have to retain that user and not lose them back to their dedicated site search engine of choice. The good news is, when it comes to actually setting up your site search for success, it shouldn't be much more than what you're already doing, and we are already doing this, right, for SEO. A good website search engine should be able to leverage all of those standards that you're already following for relevance on Google. This means that as a content manager and marketer, The more disciplined you are and have been at managing your content, the better all search engines, including yours, will leverage your metadata, meta tags, and page content. Another specific benefit here of having managed your content and website properly means that autocomplete in your search bar is all but ready to go to work for you. Whether you're using keyword autocomplete, content-based autocomplete, or a combination of the two, the most important thing to understand here is that this is a brief and critical moment in time to make a solid impression with useful suggestions. In other words, this is the first site search feature-specific area that users are experiencing. So it's imperative that this is a positive one to build that trust that we were talking about earlier. And finally, when considering how your website is actually set up, it's important to think about how your content is either unified or segmented. As an easy example, universities and higher ed organizations set up their websites with typically multiple domains that attract and serve information for various audiences, current students, different departments, events, just to name a few. Because of the complexity of how and where a visitor might actually be hitting your site or sub-sites, there are times that that end user will certainly benefit from a global search experience that unifies all of the content that you have and presents a wider breadth of results. And then there are other times when you want to segment your content and provide precision and results that are quite a bit more tailored. A good search engine should give you the capacity to do both, depending on the different scenario. After you've decided what goes on your website and how your data is structured, the next step is really focusing on how you're tracking your users' activity and behavior. Most of us here have something working for us in the background, and Phil has talked a lot about this, but Google Analytics and related tracking tools, while they've set the standard for how we take in and react to activity on our site, and in tracking what users are doing, of course, this is a great starting point and it tracks specific events as it pertains to search, and at a minimum, that's fine. There are, of course, even more valuable combinations, though, of these moments that aren't always as easily leveraged within these tracking tools. So when you dive into analytics as it pertains to site search, you really want to start to define what is the feedback, what are the KPIs that are crucial to improving your site search experience. Often when Google Analytics and other tracking tools are displaying this information, it's deposited in silos, where key components of what the search user is looking for versus what they clicked on are either found in disparate dashboards or in one mega dashboard that makes it next to impossible to make a real correlation there. How valuable would it be if you could see actually which is your top content and why it's your top content? Which types of voices and which specific search queries are actually leading to that content performing so well? This would allow you to lead straight to presenting this information in different ways to different audiences that are relevant. Reacting to what your analytics are telling you should be as easy as pushing a button to boost and block search results within your UI. When you combine user behavior tracking and analytics with manual actions that you're able to perform in the back end, you're truly able to maximize the user's experience. And this actually is a pretty fun proving ground. If you've promoted a piece of content, but users are clicking on something different, that's totally fine. Boosting content is simply a hypothesis that you're testing based on data you're receiving. And even when proven wrong, we have immediate opportunities to correct that and test the next piece of content. Having feedback in real time on these manual actions allows you to have a continual loop of improvement and deploying changes quickly. So where does this all go at the end of the day? Your customer journey does not end once they're finished researching your offering on your website. Ideally, it continues in other aspects of your business, such as your e-commerce site or your support portal. Having analytics information on the customer journey throughout the entire journey, and specifically connecting the customer's decision point to your shopfront or your support portal, allows you to start begin making a permanent identity of your users, which supports all other aspects of your business, from your sales organization all the way down to your support teams fielding calls from those customers. This places site search not only as the first line of engagement with your users, but also allows you an opportunity to capture and drive user data from the earliest engagements straight through to other applications in your entire ecosystem. So as you're planning next steps for your website, consider a few key takeaways from today. First of all, the moment matters. And because the moment matters, the tools really matter. They should be user-friendly, and analytics should be baked in and sophisticated. Not only is site search a critical moment for you to prove yourself, but it's also a unique moment in your website's lifecycle where you can actually capture your customer's voice in their own words. No other medium allows your site visitors to actually drive keyword input in this way. Capturing this signal and leveraging a combination of analytics and AI will guide you as a marketer to create better experience, optimize your content discoverability, and reveal potential gaps in the content that you're planning on creating. Finally, having a baseline for good search experience is a great first step, but it's also important to understand how site search engines can generate valuable data that enrich other touch points all the way through the customer journey. So to wrap things up, as we enter Q&A, I actually wanted to do a brief history of LucidWorks and a quick plug here for us. You may have heard of us through our enterprise product, LucidWorks Fusion, which currently powers and serves experiences for some of the world's largest brands across use cases in e-commerce, workspace, workplace knowledge management, and customer service. While we're still, of course, actively building and developing on Fusion, we've also leveraged this knowledge and created a business user-friendly package called Springboard, in which connected search serves as actually our first step in creating a search engine that covers the entire customer journey from their first step onto your website, through their purchase, and then all the way to supporting them in the future. We'd obviously love to talk about any upcoming initiatives you have for your website. We find a lot that when thinking about your tech stack as a whole, now is the time, and now is the time that site search is often overlooked, to start thinking about those things. With that, I will bring Phyllis back in because we do have some time for Q&A. We have several good questions in the chat. One is jumping out at me, though, Phyllis, and it's something I've thought a lot about over my career, especially as a content marketer, especially as somebody looking at an inherited website, which is my metadata and taxonomy is a mess. What advice would you give someone in unraveling the situation they're facing? Because, and this is my flavor added to it, it is daunting. So what do you think about that?
You know, it's daunting, and it gets more daunting when you don't address it, right? Because that set of content just keeps growing and growing, right? And it's poorly tagged or whatever. We're just making things worse. I think of it like my daughter's room. You know, she just keeps adding mess on top of it. So the thing is, and I always find that sometimes my job is to try to help our clients stay sane. And the point is, don't try to eat the elephant, okay? You got to think about what is the set of content that where all the heat and light is in your organization right now. So current campaigns, content supporting your most critical products, et cetera. Start there. So start with a pilot and say, all right, we're going to try a new approach. We're going to reorganize the content a bit. We're going to kind of set a rubric to help us determine how to do some of the tags that aren't super self-evident, like buyer journey stage, that sort of thing. We're going to think about tagging from the endpoint, which is what is it we want to measure? What are we going to want to know about the way our customers engage with the content? Let's tag against that. So you start with a discrete set of content, maybe just a couple of hundred assets. And make sure that that's working, and then roll it out slowly in tranches against your other content. It's really the only way to do it and keep your sanity, besides which you really may change things after a first run at it. So this is something that for anyone who's a Forrester client, Forrester Decisions client, it's probably one of the top things we help our clients with when it comes to content strategy and ops. So great question.
Yeah, and I again, personally, my current and former self loves that idea, and small wins along the way to make it feel like you're actually making progress is massive in supporting teams, I would imagine. We have another semi-related tool or tool question. What about analytics? Do you have a personal preference, or at least best practices either in utilizing or deciding on an analytics tool for folks that are rolling it out for the first time?
It's an interesting question because when it comes to this area of content, and my background is in business intelligence software, so I know analytics tool. The thing is, there's no one tool. What we find is that most of the vendors that touch the content lifecycle have some type of analytics built in. And the question is, what is the set of analytic tools built into your content engagement platform, your marketing automation platform, your web content delivery platform? What are the combination of things built in there, along with external things like Google Analytics? You might be buying intent data or be putting sensors on your website that pick up signals, right? It's all of those things. The question is to go at it with a set of goals on what it is you want to measure. What do you need to measure? What do you need to know about your audience? And then look at the technology you have today and look at what's already built in. And it may not be that you can get a super easy snap your fingers dashboard with everything in it at once, because the data is coming from all different places. You may have to manually pull together that so-called report or dashboard, at least at first. Obviously, if you've got a BI tool like a Tableau or something, you can bring all of that together. But even that takes some sophisticated, data analysts. There's nothing wrong with saying, hey, on a quarterly basis, I, as the head of content, am going to report on, these 6 things when it comes to demonstrating a support for demand. And I'm going to always report against those 6 things and compare back to the previous quarter. And I do that because I have a set of tools out there that are collecting that data. So again, I think it's a collection of things. There is no one thing.
That makes a lot of sense. And, we have a similar answer at the top, which is a generic non-answer of sorts, which is honestly, just pick one. Make sure that you're using it, make sure that you're tracking, and you have done a great job of defining what you're looking for, so you're not pulling at straws. So with that, we also, of course, think about it through the site search lens specifically and how it relates back. And one of the things we've been working on, and other site search engines, frankly, should be able to provide, are pixels or tracking beacons that, yes, they act the same way as a lot of those tracking tools, but it is a more direct through line to your site search engine to help inform some of that AI and ML. I am seeing another question in the chat here. What does company acquisition mean for the current marketing strategy and audience you built? How do you integrate the most effectively? So yeah, I'm reading that as like you have married a couple of different companies, and how do you now, within a marketing strategy, make that work?
Okay, so that's one of the trickiest things, because the first question is, how do you go to market versus how your acquired solutions go to market? If it's not the same, you have to be really careful not to eliminate their data as you bring them over and try to rationalize systems, especially, let's face it, your Salesforce automation or your CRM session, right? Because the data that you maintain in a CRM system is going to be different depending on how you go to market. Do you go to market if you're in technology as a cloud solution versus on-premises? Those are still out there. Really big difference in the way you market and the kind of information you need on your customer base. So you want to be really careful before you start rationalizing systems that support content and marketing in general, that you don't lose data. That's like the big mistake we see people make. The other thing too is to be okay. Well, I mean, there's the whole issue of what's the right way to handle the brand, but let's set that aside because I don't think that's probably not what the question is about. But you have to determine, with the new solutions you've acquired, do you have the same goals? Can those goals be met by pulling the new company into your technology? Or is it best to leave things alone for a while? When I was at Oracle, we made a very conscious decision to let Eloqua function on its own for years because it was very different than the other stuff that Oracle was selling. And I have to say, I thought Oracle did a very good job of being really slow about integrating Eloqua. Same thing if you look at, well, you know what, I'm thinking of NetSuite. They've marketed that in a very different way. It's totally different than their other products. So let's not mess with something that works. So anyway, I hope that partly answers the question.
That is great. Yes, thank you so much. I actually have one related to some of the ML AI references. Basically, the question is, how can I add ML and AI to my website search? I have a quick answer for that because, again, it amounts to almost a cheeky answer, but it's true. And it relates back to everything that you've talked about, Phyllis, which is the short answer from our perspective, of course, is site search. Your good site search engine should have ML and AI baked into it so that it's user-friendly and it's starting to work for you straight away. But again, this is the important part, that it's assuming that you've done the work, that your house is in order from a data governance perspective, from a site structure perspective. In other words, ML and AI is not going to solve your data problems. And that's important to know. And I think that there's an assumptive shortcut involved with ML and AI that a lot of folks tend to think of, and it's not the case. It doesn't replace good practices. I wonder if you have anything to expand on that.
Well, look, so right now, AI is baked into every darn system somewhere. Maybe it's not great. Maybe in many cases, it is more advanced than marketers are even able to tap into or use. It's not like you can take an AI tool and just add it on top of everything. It's baked into different systems to do different things. And frankly, the only way it works is if we train it, right? And then if we bring insights back into our planning cycle based on the way the AI has responded and grown. So it has to be monitored really closely. I don't think just looking for AI is particularly a relevant goal for anybody. It's a matter of looking for the technologies that provide the capabilities you need that include AI in order to scale. That's really the biggest thing that AI does for us. Well, it helps us personalize, but it helps us scale that personalization. So it's a matter of trying to understand from vendors that you talk to exactly what their AI does in their system. And in addition to that, and this is one of the most important things that I tell clients, is to look at what you already have and determine if you're actually using all of the features, AI being in particular something that may be underutilized in what you already own. So.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And that it resonates with me because a lot of the conversations we're having are during tech stack revivals, if you will. And that is part of the whole process. We are, I'm looking for more questions here. I think we're about set on questions for now. We will be responding to a few of these by email. But with that, I will move us on. And I want to thank you, Phyllis, so much again for joining us today. All that information was incredibly helpful. We can close out, but I do want to say my personal takeaways: don't lose data and don't eat the elephant. So I particularly wanted to thank you for that. Yeah, those are important life lessons and business lessons. So thank you so much, everyone, for joining us. Again, we will be sharing this on-demand version with everyone that attended, and there are additional resources in the resource section. So thank you and have a lovely day.
Thank you.